This is a daughter podcast where dads come to talk, think, and thrive with your hosts, Oscar and Blandon. Our mission is to cultivate a community of strong, mindful, and present fathers.
We want to curate honest conversations with all men, but especially those who have the honor of raising daughters.
Hey everyone, Oscar here at the Daughter Podcast with Blandon on the other side. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
We're doing all right. We're working through some things here at the family, but we're good. We're doing good.
Yeah, I heard you had a mishap with your light over there.
The light's gone. We'll have to fix that light. The dog decided to use it as a chew toy. And my little one decided to have a full second reactor meltdown. And so that's been interesting.
I'm very familiar with meltdowns. They're either nuclear or radioactive or full-on Godzilla. Yeah.
It was full nuclear. It was interesting.
Yeah.
So I tried to use some parenting techniques that we've talked about.
Okay.
That I've learned through reading and whatnot. It didn't work. So we're going to talk about some parenting techniques today. I say techniques because there's these parenting styles, right? You probably read through them. I'm sure our listeners have at some point heard some psychologists talk about these styles. And so we're going to get into some of these today and figure out where we land.
So are we talking about like the buzz word of like gentle parenting, or I think that's a subcategory, right? That's not like a
I think that's a made-up category by the Snowflake Society right now, but we'll get into that.
Okay.
Let's see. What parenting style do you get into, Glenn? What parenting style do you consider yourself to use?
I think that I am a hybrid of parenting styles. What ultimately I would like to remain in is like a lighthouse parenting style. So that's where you are like the guiding beacon for your child, but you allow them to take responsibility for their actions, make the mistakes, do the things that they need to do, and they learn from that. But they also have this light, right? The kids are the ships, you are the light, and you guide them to the path that they need to go. But of course, I have small girls, so you can't always do that because then they would crash into the shore.
I think as I read through some of these things that I fall into some of these cracks in all of the styles, and I attribute that to just trying to figure it out, right? Like trial by error, no manual. We talked about this in other episodes, right? Like you don't have a manual, you're making the manual yourself. But then what's funny with the manual that you're making is that it doesn't really work the same for everybody else. If you have a Chevy, Chevy truck and it has a manual, you could probably use the same exact manual in the same way for every truck every time. The parenting manual that I imagine in my head that I'm making probably won't work for you, or it might. I don't know.
But we have different girls, right? And so that's the whole point. Like they need their own specific. I think there's some generalities of like moral values and politeness and courtesies and understanding like respect and honor and kindness.
Yeah.
But how that's demonstrated for each child, and especially girls, I think you have to have some nuance with it and understand your child. Yeah.
I agree. And that we sometimes forget that they are human. Like they're their own human, right? So We'll get into some of these. So as I mentioned, our viewers may already have an idea of I think it's 4, maybe 5 main parenting styles, named parenting styles by psychology. I won't get, again, no experts here, at least I'm not. So
not an expert, so we're on the same level playing field with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll talk about what those are, but then there's subcategories to parenting styles. So they don't even necessarily fall within these, but I think that's where you and I are leading to, where you're picking up certain things from these official styles, if you will, and then not necessarily making your own, but falling into some other subcategory of parent. And then there's some other subcategories that I won't even get into because I literally couldn't even understand how people do that. And I'm not trying to judge. I was just like, how is that even possible? So I'm not going to get into those because I'm not here to... Yeah, I'm not here to be judgmental. I'm trying to just figure out myself as a parent, and you're trying to figure out yourself as a parent, particularly of girls. And all we know is girls, or right? Because
Yeah.
we live in, that's our world. Yeah, so that's our perspective. I'm hoping that our listeners can and our viewers can send back their perspectives and see where we match those. So the main four parenting styles that we looked through, and I looked through some peer-reviewed stuff and whatnot. Ultimately, just giving a little bit of a summary here, right? So the four main parenting styles we're looking at is authoritarian, permissive, authoritative, and uninvolved, or also can be called a neglectful parent.
Right.
Right. In parents.com, it goes into how those parenting styles affect the child. And again, as I read through these, I'm like, but do they though? Like, if my child's not affected that way when I do X, Y, Z, but another child may be. And as you mentioned, they're probably a generalization of an overall category of children, if you will. The authoritarian, I don't think there's much to explain with that. You're the authority figure. It says here you're making decisions. You are putting rules in place, and they are going to be obeyed or else, right? So there's really no place for negotiation. I'll be honest with you. Every so often, I got to be the authoritative parent. Like I'll try to give options. I'll try to do these things, and then it gets to the point I'm like, this is what we're doing, and it's never a popular opinion. And for some reason, my wife lets me be the bad guy almost every time when it comes to that.
Of course. Nobody wants to always be the bad guy. You know what I'm saying?
I guess that's my role. Yeah. It says these parents have high expectations and don't hesitate to punish children when they're not followed through the guideline. And then it says here, the way that it affects parents is that they may be behaved at home, but then may show signs of rebellion when they're with their peers. They may also struggle with social skills, indecisiveness, and trouble thinking on their own, low self-esteem, poor judgment of character, anger.
So that's how it affects the kids.
This is how it affects the kids. Yeah,
okay.
That's right. I'm sorry. So this is how authoritarian parenting affects the children.
Got you. Okay.
And these are scary. Like when I look at one of the biggest ones that stands out to me is indecisiveness and trouble thinking on their own.
Yeah.
And then poor judge of character, right? That's scary to me because, man, if you're a poor judge of character, that can go wrong in so many ways in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the thing that fathers bring a lot of. And I'm not saying that mothers don't bring that to the table. I'm just saying I personally believe that fathers give children, and especially girls, the confidence to make the right decisions and not be paralyzed by indecision. And I think indecision is really what is like plaguing a lot of people. They don't know how to make a decision and then just be accountable for it and then go forward in that decision and say, hey, whatever. I remember you talking about that, like with your oldest, you wanted her to say, hey, everything has a consequence. Every action has a consequence. Make sure you own it. And I think that's the echoing of a father. Hey, nobody's going to be out here to save you. If you make this decision, you need to own it.
And to your point, single mothers can do the same, right? But I do know, at least in my household, because I may be the bad guy, I'm also the person that is going to let them fail sometimes. That's your decision. Go do it, right? And they might struggle with it, but I'll just let them go do it. Yeah. Knowing sometimes what might come out of that, unless it's a safety issue, I'm like, all right, is this what you want to do? And my wife will sometimes be like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, just let it be.
Yeah.
But sometimes to a fault. The other thing, though, particularly in our current environment, is trouble thinking on their own. Mm-hmm. So how easy is it for you to go on social media, read a headline, and make an assumption? Clickbait that's what it's based on. You see this headline, you instantly make a judgment call just based off the headline, maybe the article as well because it's bias of some sort. But now you can't make a decision for yourself. You can't think for yourself. That's what I tell my daughter. She'll come home and she'll say something nuts. And I say nuts because she'll come in and she'll just say, she'll just go political.
Yeah.
She's 12.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are we talking about here? And I understand through study and school, like I understand politics a lot better than my 12-year-old does. And we don't discuss politics like that in our house. Like, it's not a taboo, but it's just not something. She's 12. Like, my wife and I attempt to discuss it in a logical manner, right?
Right.
Because we are the guiding light, to our children. So if I go off the handle and say that politician's a whatever,
right,
that's it.
Yeah.
That's what goes on. Yes, we do that to our kids if we're not careful. But how easy is it for your kid to come home from school, heard someone say this, and now they're going off the handle on something they don't fully understand. And that's where I stop my daughter and I say, listen, just think for yourself. You heard this thing. Great. How about you go research this?
Right.
Find out what they're actually talking about. Get a little background to it, because odds are what you hear is not accurate.
Right. And I think that is also the problem that is like plaguing a lot of the educational system, is that they want to teach our children like what to think and not how to think.
Right, yeah.
And I was reading this book on critical thinking, and I'll never forget it. The example was, if you read one author, you become a mimic. If you read two authors or two books, then you're confused. But if you read 10 books, then you begin to like have a perspective. And if you read 100 books, now you've developed your own voice. And I'm of the school that I want my children to develop their own voice based on objective truths and
Right.
not just how you feel about this subject. Get muddled in your emotions because they change every day. They switch up from moment to moment. But if there are some things, and that's why I don't like people who try to revise history, because then you're looking at certain things through a 21st century point of view, and you're not taking into account the historical antiquity of it. And now you're trying to rewrite it based on how you feel in 2024. Right. And it's like, no, you can't do that. It doesn't work. Right. But yeah, I want my children to be critical thinkers and to think for themselves. And even if they disagree with me, that's the whole point of dialogue and discourse. Hey, okay, well, support it. Stand on it. Stand stand on your like position, but be able to defend it and intelligently and objectively. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had that talk before where they'll come up and say, I don't want to do that. I'm like, why? And they'll give me some weird thing. And I'm like, that's not a good enough argument. Sorry, go back to the drawing board. We're doing it. So I think we're both in agreement that authoritarian parenting, we probably do pick things up in there. And there's probably a good time for that, right? Like a safety issue.
Yeah.
I'm probably just going to go in and be like, nope, not doing that. And there's no ifs, ands about it. Like, it's just, It is what it is.
Right.
The next one is permissive parenting. Permissive parents, it says that they are essentially allowing the child to what they want. They permit most everything. Here it says how it affects the children, since they have a high standing in the household. So the children have a high standing in the household. Right. They are accustomed to getting whatever they want. They may exhibit more behavioral problems as they don't appreciate rules and authorities. Other issues are lack of responsibility, difficulty with decision making. We just talked about that, right? Impulsiveness and aggressiveness, lack of independent and personal responsibility, anxiety and depression, and academic struggles. I do not like to be the permissive parent. Reading through all of the stuff I was reading, I was like, that's not me.
You aren't a permissive parent?
No, sir.
Oh,
looking at
puppy dog eyes those little girls have, you're not a little bit permissive?
I have to look away. Sometimes.
I know that's right. Right.
Put on my glasses and I'm like, sorry, I can't see you. We're moving on. No, because the effects of that, at least according to this writing, the effects of that are wholly detrimental, right? Anxiety, depression, we know that we have a huge issue with that in our current society. Lack of independence, personal responsibility, huge issue in our society. Impulsiveness, aggressiveness, just the fact that you think you can just be impulsive and get whatever you want at the very moment, and we have this sense of instant gratification that has to happen because of our current, as you mentioned, our current environment. It's not good. Now, do I give in to my kids sometimes? Absolutely.
Right.
Sometimes I'm forced to give in to my kids, and I appreciate that for my wife because I could be more of that. But we talk a lot about, let's just like food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any parent can let their kids just go wild on whatever they want to eat.
Right.
And we know scientifically that we're going to go choose something that tastes good and gives us quick energy. What is that? It's normally sugar, right? Mm-hmm. Our kids are almost wired to go pick up this sugary snack or this carbohydrates or what have you. And we talk about that. We talk about that a lot because I tell them, like, just treat your body good and your body will then treat you good. Right? And so we don't permit them to just go into wherever, and reluctantly we have some crappy snacks in the pantry, but we don't just allow them to go do that. In fact, the rule, at least with Dad, is I say, girls, if you're gonna get something healthy, you don't even have to ask me. Just go get it. I don't even care. If you're gonna have anything that is packaged and has to be opened up, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
Because then I can control that. Like, all right, you're not making right decisions. No, you can't have that. Or sure, you already had a good dinner. Go ahead. So it's not a reward. It's just showing them the difference between something that's healthful for them and then something that is not.
Yeah. And I think that's the importance of when you have the balance of the two parents. Like you said, one can be a bad guy in one situation and one can be a bad guy in another situation. Rules, I'm typically the bad guy, but when it comes to food, snacking, sugary drinks, my wife is a totalitarian dictator. And I'm a little ashamed to say this, but I did not know what actual serving sizes look like until I married her. She is a person who looks at the actual back of things and is, oh no, that's the serving size for this is only like 3 Oreos or something like that.
Right.
Or the serving size for this is a cup full of popcorn. Like, you don't need all of that popcorn. You don't need all of this soda. So she looks at the serving sizes for everything. And so with food, she is the bad guy. And the girls know that I'm probably the softer spot to go to. So they try to go to me, but I'm like, hey, did you ask your mom?
And they were like, that's right. Did you ask the boss? No, we did not.
All right. No. So, yeah.
Yeah, very good. So the next one, according to this writing here, it says is the gold standard of parenting styles, and that is the authoritative parenting. This one talks about you being more connected to the child, explaining reasons behind rules, setting limits, enforcing rules, and giving some consequences, but also considering your child's feelings. And then you use positive discipline strategies such as praise and rewards.
Yeah.
The effect on the child as a authoritative parent says that the child raised with this style of parenting tends to be happy, confident, and successful. They're also more likely to make sound decisions, evaluate safety risk on their own. Authoritative parenting is also linked to academic achievement, heightened self-esteem, and resiliency. And then it says kids with this type of parent tend to have the following positive outcomes: close, nurturing relationships with parents, more likely to be happy and successful, and the ability to clearly express their emotions. What do you think of that?
Yeah,
the gold standard.
Yeah, I think that one's the one that resonates the most with me in the style of parenting that I try to go after. I want them to know the reason why. Now, not all the time, like we said, sometimes you just need to know this. But I want them to be fully aware that I'm putting this rule in place because of this. Like, I didn't just come to this arbitrary. Now, some things I do come to arbitrarily, right? Like, you're not getting this at this time, or you haven't had yet, so why are you asking for like a sugary treat or something like that? But most of the time I try to talk to them and explain to them when they've gotten in trouble, why they've gotten disciplined. And it does show for a closer relationship that we have. because even my youngest will say, Daddy, is this appropriate or inappropriate? And that's because we've had conversations about what is appropriate. What does appropriate mean? It's the right thing. Okay, what's inappropriate? It's the wrong thing. Okay, so now they want to know like what my view of it is, so then it shapes their view. So I like this parenting style, and it's full of praise, still with positive reinforcement. Okay, yes, because you have listened to me, you've trusted me with this, or I can now trust you. Like I tell my girls, hey, if you want to watch this show a little bit before bed, I know I'm breaking all the parenting rules by letting them watch a little TV before bed, but I do. But anyway, nevertheless, but I tell them, hey, once this episode goes off, you need to turn it off and you need to go to bed. If you do not do that, you won't get any TV. And sure enough, they turn it off and they go to bed because they understand that I have made this rule and they're going to listen to it because they don't want the consequence. And they also understand that it's, oh, so now if I do this, Daddy will trust me more. And that's important to them as well. So
Right.
I like this parenting style.
How good are you at that parenting style? How good do you think you are?
Oof. On what kind of scale? Give me a scale.
Say 1 to 10. 1 being horrible.
Okay, so on a scale of on 1 to 10, I'm gonna give myself a solid 7. 7 with this kind
overachiever. Overachiever. Listen, I agree with you. I think the gold standard for parenting is probably that, and it's something that I probably aspire to do. Yeah. I'm not that good at it, right? And the nice thing and the lucky thing for me is I have my wife that can check me on these things. Sure. Because I think a lot of it, and we talked a little bit about this, you and I, off a podcast, but the way you're brought up has an indefinite effect into this, right? And so I think a lot of the ways that maybe I was brought up, I think my parents were a little more authoritarian, very strict. And so I catch myself doing those things. Yeah. The problem is, and we talked a little about this already, right? Every so often, that's okay because I know it's a safety issue. I don't care what you say. This is a no. Yeah. Hard no. Yeah. But I also tend to sometimes get into the weeds on things where it's like something that really, we talked a little about this before, right? That dad capital, like something that really doesn't matter. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm standing my ground. We're not doing it. Yeah. And so then I have Megan, hey, stop. Like, we're going to do this. And so I'm really appreciative that she has my back. And I forget because I have standards for myself. So it's easy for me not to have sugar. So I just like, no sugar. Yeah. It's not the same for everybody, right? So I could pass buy a donut and just wave and be like, that's fine. I don't need you. But it's not the same for everybody. Sometimes forget that, especially as children, like it's definitely not, it's not what I need to be doing. Definitely. Yeah. So the final official parenting style is neglectful or uninvolved parenting. And if you're listening to this podcast, odds are that's not you. But there is some major effects to being a neglectful and uninvolved parenting. Again, no judgment here. This is just you and I started this podcast to get better, to be more present, to be more mindful of how we parent our girls. I'm going to talk through some of these, but I'm not going to spend too much time here, right? It says here, it's funny, it says, do any of these statements sound familiar? You don't ask your child about your homework or their homework or school. You rarely know where your child is or who they're with. You don't spend time with your child. You don't have many rules and expectations. So as I read through that, I'm like, no to all of those. I was glad that there was no question. I was like, yeah. So no, it's a no for me. But it talks about that. I don't need to go much deeper into those specifics. It says the effect of uninvolved parenting says here that they often, or research has found that kids with uninvolved parents have the worst outcomes and they are more likely to experience some of the following: substance abuse, rebelliousness, delinquency, and it states a bunch of different types of delinquencies, lower cognitive and emotional empathy, diminished self-esteem, and talked about they're having trouble at school, they're not choosing the right people to be around, that kind of stuff. Again, I truly believe that the folks listening to our podcast are not part of that group of folks. And I try We talked about this in our last episode. It's hard to do because sometimes you and I are gone, and we're working just like a lot of the parents are out there. But when I'm home, I try to be as present as possible with the girls.
I agree.
So as we go through those, we went through the four main types. These are the four styles that psychology names out for parenting styles. Then we have some subtypes of parenting styles. And I think this is where a lot of us land, where we're taking bits and pieces, hopefully not from the neglective side. Although, listen, again, looking from the outside in, that one time you give your kid that iPad because you're like, I just need you to like leave me alone. I'm guilty.
Yeah. But I mean, that neglectful style almost feels like you don't have a parent at all, right? Like they're not involved at all. Me
Right.
handing the iPad is, I'm a little involved. I'm here. I'm here to give you the iPad.
Well,
I bought the
listen,
iPad.
I don't know how my wife does it. There's been times where I'm with the girls for repeated days, and I'm like, I need a minute. Like, take this. There's some Bluey. Have a good day. I'm gonna go over here and like breathe, maybe work out for a second.
Yeah, you need that to recharge. So that's fair.
Yeah.
I feel like that's fair.
But again, no judgment here. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
it's possible. I veer into that every so often. I want to believe most parents at some point use that as a coping mechanism, if you will. The other types or subtypes of parenting are named as free range, helicopter, snowplow, lighthouse, attachment, and tiger parenting. I found these very interesting. I legit didn't know. I think the only one I've ever heard of is helicopter parenting. I've never heard of the others before looking into this stuff.
Who are they again? Let me see.
They were free range, helicopter,
Helicopter for sure. Yeah.
yeah, snowplow.
Never heard of snowplow.
And we'll give you some learning here in a minute. Lighthouse,
Heard of that.
attachment, and then tiger parenting.
Yeah, definitely heard of tiger parent. Yeah.
So when we're looking at free range parenting, sometimes can be considered neglectful. This because many times they tend to endanger their kids. This is according to parents.com. Don't come after the daughter podcast here. It says, this is interesting. So most recently, after much debate, states like Utah passed laws in favor of the hands-off parenting, that's free-range parenting, right? Specifically, Utah changed the definition of neglect so that it does not include certain independent childhood activities like walking to school and playing outside. I found that super crazy because that's all I did when I was a kid.
Right.
And I tell you right now, my parents were not free-range parents at all. I'm like, when I saw that, I'm like, there's laws that say you can't have your kid walk to school or play outside. That's crazy to me. But anyway, that's what it was. And again, to be fair, I take some of those aspects, right? If I take the kids, like if we go out in the woods, I want them to explore.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I consider that maybe free ranging. Like I just go and look for things and fall over and get a scratch. Like go do these things, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a little bit of that. But anyway, I found that one interesting. The next one, and again, I guess I did hear about free range before. And I did hear about this one, helicopter parenting. If you're an overprotective parent who feels the need to control most aspects of your child's life, you likely fit the bill of a helicopter parent. Helicopter parents constantly intervene in their kids' lives and they obsess about success and failure. The risk assessing tendencies of helicopter parents are often driven by fear and anxiety. Parents who intervene in this way can hinder a child's ability to learn integral life skills, confidence, and self-sufficiency. Research by the American Psychological Association found that kids who experience helicopter parents are less likely to be able to manage their own emotions and behaviors. What do you think of that?
Yeah, do you see all these same things, like how parenting styles go into things like mental development and emotional development? So that's what's so crazy to have a person that you're responsible for and then not understand that how you show up and how you care for them and love on them literally shapes how they're going to be for the rest of their life. And for me, being cognizant of that is, I think I've said it before, is like super overwhelming because you don't want to be the parent that was sleeping on the job, so to speak, and now your adult child has all of these issues with anxiety and fear and can't make decisions and this, that, and the other, and you're like, I don't know what happened because I was a great dad, or I was always there and I was always putting food on the table. And it's, yeah, but did you nurture them in the ways that mattered for them?
And you have to, again, we're going to put things into context, right? Like,
Yeah.
Historical context matters, right?
Yeah.
So how your parents were raised, how you were raised within
That's
that
true.
context of time matters. And you know, when I look at helicopter parenting, I don't think I'm a helicopter parent, although every so often I think all of us make decisions based off of our own fears and anxieties, right? We make decisions for our children based off of those fears and anxieties. For example, as a father of girls, a fear and anxiety is that someone will grab my girls and they'll take them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Child abduction, human trafficking is a very real thing. And it's maybe even more real for folks in the military who study and maybe even take part in preventing those things. So we get a lot of knowledge where it's like, I'm sorry, nope, we're not doing that. It's not okay with me. You leaving here on your bike to go to X location, nope, we're good. I'll take you. Or we just don't do that. And again, that's based off of a fear and anxiety that I have. Not that it's something that my kids should have, but it's an awareness that might heighten my decision making. And I'm not mad at it. Like,
Right.
I want to protect my children. I want to protect my girls from that side of that ugly side of the world. And we know that it's out there, right?
Yeah. And I think that's super important to make that distinction, that is your concern and fear, because I try to make that my MO. That's my agenda, for me to look out for you and not for them at this point to just be fearful and scared of the world at large. I am the one who is looking out for you. You should be running around somewhat blissfully unaware until now you become more responsible for yourself. And now, we're enlightening you more about the worries of the world, so to speak. I don't want my 5-year-old to go through the world and not be friendly to people because, oh, that's a stranger. And like, now we do explain, if you're not with mommy or daddy, you don't just run up to random people because you don't know them. And not necessarily because they're going to do you harm. They might, but you just don't know them. And you want to be respectful of people's, their bubble and their personal space. And so they understand it from that perspective, not from one of like fear mongering in your children and giving them irrational fears. I was also reading this about implanting irrational fears in your children. And it's when kids are walking across a parking lot and someone is, hey, come over here before a car hits you. There are no cars in the parking lot, by the way. There are no cars even coming. But now you've said a car is going to hit them. And it's like, why would you implant that? Instead, just say, hey, we don't walk in the middle of parking lots. We just walk on the sidewalk. That's giving more of a direction on how to behave in a situation rather than implanting an irrational fear. So I totally understand what you're saying. And I completely agree with that.
And I just think we have to be careful of doing that and then doing it too much. For one, for fear of, again, there's a word, right? So for fear of helicopter parenting, but also for fear of fear mongering, because you don't want your child to just grow up in constant fear of the world. Because, hey, the world might be scary, but you got to go face it one way or the other, right? So we try to prepare them for that. Here's the other one, though. It might be congruent or contrasting. I can't figure it out, but it's called snowplow parenting.
Okay.
Also known as lawnmower or bulldoze parents. This is essentially the parent that does everything possible to plow down anything standing in the child's way. Yeah, these type of parents often have good intentions and don't want their children to experience struggle. However, their habits don't provide long-term happiness and they can worsen child's anxiety. So imagine if your mom just ensured that there was zero struggles for you ever.
That would have been terrible.
How do you parent like that? Like, my head, I have to literally scratch my head. I'm like, dude, as they grow up, struggles, life is suffering. That's the term, right? Life is a struggle. Yeah, it takes reference to some parents. Some of these types of parents are the folks that are convicted of bribing colleges to get their kids admitted to the school, kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
So found that interesting because we know that's happened.
Yeah, that college admission scandal. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I am 100% not that person. I can tell you that right now. If my actually we had this I think last week. My 3-year-old was trying to walk, and she's like, "This is in my way." And I was like, "All right, walk over it or move it out of the way." I was confused when she said that. Like, what do you want me to do? Which is funny because she's 3, but she's asking me to go plow this thing out of the way, and I'm like, "No, that's not how we work around here."
Yeah, what she wanted you to do is move it out the way, put a bed of roses down for her as she walked through the princess that she is. Come on now.
That's right. Absolutely.
Ed?
Then we go into the lighthouse parent. One of the most balanced methods of parenting, the lighthouse approach, was coined by the pediatric. I'm not going to go into that. We're going to post this link in the show notes so you guys can go in there and click this particular article so you see where to grab the information. And I'm paraphrasing a lot of these things too. So for the listeners out there, I'm not reading every single word on here. So just know that the link will be in the show notes so that you guys can use that. But it's talking about. It says the lighthouse parent style involves finding the perfect balance between loving, protecting, communicating, and nurturing the child. Parents seek to guide and support their children much like a lighthouse does. So there you go. You were talking about that, trying to be that lighthouse parent, trying to be that guiding light. It's important to remember that you're a lighthouse regardless, even if you don't want this, in the sense that your kids are always watching you.
They are.
So it's literally not what you say, it's what you do. And we know that, and yet we still fall into that trap of don't do what I just did. It's not a good idea. Also, just understand that I think you had mentioned it right before we push play here. This says related topics to lighthouse parenting is gentle parenting. Oh, yes, so you could be too bright of a light where you light everything up, and now you're not letting them find their own way. Right? Understand that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Humble me, sir. Humble me. Yeah.
No, I'm not humbling anybody.
No. Humble me.
It's on the paper, my friend. It's on the paper.
No, humble me. No, that's good. Because I didn't, until you just said that put that in perspective of now I'm just a glorified snowplow parent at that point. If I'm like too brighten up, I'm blinding them almost. And so they're just looking at this light and they're not finding. No, that's a good point. Look at you. Are you a psychologist on this?
I do smart things sometimes. The final one is attachment parent. Now this one again, I didn't
I've not heard of it.
As attachment parents involves a nurturing and hands-on approach. These think that putting a child's needs first leads to independence and emotional stability. Parents that follow this style value physical closeness, bed sharing, and co-sleeping, extended breastfeeding, positive discipline, and other attachment-based approaches to raising their children. A study done by the American Academy of Pediatrics found an association between sensitive, responsive parenting and children's language skills, specifically kids of parents with higher levels of responsiveness and warmth had more than 2 times better language skills than children whose parents were less responsive. So yeah, there you go. There is another portion on here. It did not print, so I'm not going to get into that in case I don't want to misspeak for that portion. But again, we'll have that link for y'all in the notes. So here you go, attachment parents. This is interesting too because we've never done the co-sleeping thing. Again, not judging anybody here, just we've not done the co-sleeping thing. Even when they were babies, we'd put them in a little bassinet next to the bed. It wasn't. Right. I think that's still considered co-sleeping. I'm not really sure if it's got to be in the same bed. But it's interesting because my wife and I both practice some of this stuff. We like to be physically close with our kids, and I like to hold my girls. And when I get home, I almost demand a hug. Like I want to be able to hug my children. Right. So maybe part of that, and we try to talk to them. We try to talk to them as emotionally stable as possible. Right. Just mentioned that we had a nuclear reactor go off here, not before we started his. So it's not always possible. Finally, the last parenting sub-style is tiger parenting. Often displaying rigid and harsh characteristics, tiger parents expect obedience is success. This term gained mainstream attention due to some book, you guys can read that, where it describes tiger parenting as an authoritarian method commonly used in Chinese culture. Some research has found a correlation between tiger parenting and anxiety in children, possibly due to the parents' high demands and constant expectations of perfection. Again, I didn't know that was a style of any sort. We've met those parents. I think my parents have a bunch of these different things in them. Again, we mentioned this in one of the episodes. In hindsight, I'm like, they were just trying to figure it out like I am. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, there you go. There you have it. There's these sub styles that I think are a mesh of the different main styles of parent. And I like to try to look at these things objectively so that I don't tie myself into a box. And it's not because I want to be, outside the box. It's just because I don't want to be in the box and then not give my child what they need. And then the other thing we talked about too is that the child is different. Every child is different. The temperaments are different. Just everything is different, right? Expecting one child to respond to one style just like the other one would is sometimes unlikely, right? And so, not that you have to go and just be like, I'm an authoritarian with this one, and I'm like permissive with this one. That's not what I'm getting at. But you have to figure out how to maneuver through those styles, I think. And that's where I find it difficult, and I'm sure a lot of parents do, just maneuvering through those styles, knowing when to be authoritarian because of a safety issue or what have you, knowing when to be permissive, right? Like I have a hard time with that, is to give that, just let them do some things and that don't necessarily, just as you mentioned, the donut, not necessarily good for you. Actually, there's zero benefit to the donut other than a little bit of happiness that comes with the sugar. But nutritiously, there's no benefit. But again, the happiness with the sugar might be what they need for the day.
For those brief moments, you get that nice chocolate glazed donut. I'm sorry. Anyway, yeah.
Then it makes you feel like crap. I'm just going to point that out. It makes you feel, after that brief moment, you're like, I shouldn't have ate that.
Yeah, maybe later on. Like later on when you look in the mirror after you've scarfed down a dozen. But not in that moment. But yeah, no, I definitely get what you're saying. Yeah. But I also will say this, because these children are different. And I don't think people really understand until you have children how different they can be. They're like night and day. So you can have a child that you need to really rein them in. Like they need to be inside the rails or they're going outside the rails all the time. And then there's another child that you have that is a self-starter, self-motivated. They really don't need that much direction because they are pursuing the direction themselves for whatever reason. And they're like night and day. And so, yeah, I kind of think sometimes you would have to parent them differently, because if you try to, if you were a tiger parent with both of them, I think one would feel like real crap and the other one would be like, okay, get out of here. So it would be ineffective on both ends, right?
Yeah. And to that point, I'm not making any claims here, but I know parents with both girls and boys, and all the parents I know that have a contrasting child, girl and boy, every single one that I know has told me there is a distinct difference.
For sure.
In what the boy's getting into, what the girl's getting into, how they raise the boy, how they raise the girl. Sure, some of it might be cultural, but there is a distinct difference. So again, not making any claims here. I only have girls, but we'll have some of our folks that have that contrasting view.
Right.
Gladly to come on. And please give us some feedback on that, because I only have the girls, and I try not to be that parent. My kid won't do that, but I have girls, and so we'll go out sometimes. I'm like, my girls are so well behaved, and that little boy is just like nuts. And it could be just a child, not necessarily a boy or a girl, but I tend to see it in boys about the same age as my daughters. So I'm making my own contrast as I'm looking at that. Something to think about, throw out there.
Yeah,
but hey, listen, what's that? Everyone out there watching, listening, come join us in conversation. If this is bringing any value to you, please throw those comments into the conversations at daughterpodcast.com. Also, leave us a review for the podcast. It would greatly help us figure out how we can better serve you in this platform. We're on all the social medias. We have Facebook, Instagram, Threads now, and
wow, we're cool.
We're on Threads. I made that happen. I don't know how. I think I pressed the wrong button, but it's in there. On all those and all that social media, it is at Daughter Podcast. Come join our conversation, as I mentioned. Let us know how we can get better. Let us know what topics you guys want to talk about, and we'll keep grinding out here, parenting our girls, and hoping to get better with you all. Oscar here. Blandon, you got any closing comments?
Yeah, one closing comment for the dad homies that are out there. We have a Facebook page for the podcast. So it is the Daughtered Podcast Facebook page. And so we want to cultivate community on there. We want to hear your story about how you first were daughtered. We also want to cultivate, eventually, like me and Oscar were saying, some daddy-daughter date meetups. So go to Facebook, look us up. It's the group, it's the page, the Daughter Podcast. And this is like after the podcast where you can interact with me and Oscar there and throw in some suggestions. Like Oscar keeps saying, we're trying to get better for our girls. We're trying to get better for our families and society. And the way we do that is create community. So come join us in that community.
That's right. Thank you all very much. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Later.